Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. I think you know our goal by now. To help create better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance pros and help them execute better for their customers that they have. And a lot of times the two areas kind of cross over. In today's episode, I get a chance to speak with Brendan Hermelin. He's the CEO and founder of Thalo Labs. And he traces a zigzag path from NASA and defense to self-driving cars, then into HVAC. His through line, high reliability sensing and prognostics. What he's used in his past can be used now and applied to HVAC with the technology changes that are happening. And simply put, Thalo's product aims to give every heat pump a cell phone. He has a small, non-invasive module that snaps inside of VRFs or splits and eventually larger plants and measures power and line temperatures, backhauls that information via cellular, and flags problems in the system, undercharged, leaks, power quality issues, things like that before they become emergency calls. It's equipment management, not full building management, but it's lightweight, easy to install, built for techs, and friendly to API integrations such as texts or even weekly roll-ups. Brendan argues that the market is really ready. Most commercial buildings still lack BMS. Wi-Fi is fragile for critical telemetry, this data, and the economics of sensors and cloud have really flipped in favor of this. Thalo avoids tapping the refrigerant loop and prioritizes fast installs, 10 to 30 minutes, QR location tagging, and even a buzz this unit feature to find the right rooftop box. Early field data is very sobering. He's seeing 40% of heat pumps undercharged or leaking, driving callbacks, compressor failures, energy waste, and dissatisfied customers. His pitch to contractors: turn break-fix chaos into planned maintenance, white label the savings report, and train new techs faster with data-driven cues. And the name Thalo, it comes from the deep sky blue, which is an homage to adding tech to make the picture clearer. Brendan's LinkedIn is in the notes. Website link is in the notes. If this interests you in the least bit, I suggest you get in touch. But let's get in this conversation now, where Brendan Hermelin talks about giving every heat pump a cell phone, Predictive HVAC with Thalo Labs. Welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. I am elkless again today, but that's okay. He's getting a well-deserved vacation. But I do have a new person, a guest that I met just over a month ago, Brendan Hermelin. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Pleasure to be on the podcast. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for coming along. You got some interesting things. I met you at the NCI Summit back in Austin, Texas in early September, and you had come to talk with contractors about a new product. And I think that is such a great idea. More companies should do that.
It seems like if you want to build a tool for people who are going to use it, you should probably talk to them and get their take on it.
But first, can you give us some background on where you've come from and what you're doing right now? We can get to that point. But where did you come from? What kind of led you to this product?
Yeah, I'm happy to give a little background on myself and also where we've come as a company. So I've had a circuitous route to delivering, I think, really interesting technologies for HVAC and the people working in HVAC. I actually came out of aerospace and defense, spent the first part of my career working at NASA on space missions, primarily worrying about things that would emit greenhouse gases, actually. Some of those are on Earth, but a lot of them are not. For example, comets and the moon, in some cases, actually emit quite a bunch of greenhouse gases. It was always interesting to me because as I went through different portions of my career, I was quite aware of just how much greenhouse gases were being emitted by the built environment. In my estimation, it's the single largest source of greenhouse gases. But also that we totally know how to deal with those problems. And in fact, the top 1% of buildings and in defense and aerospace, we never really have that many problems with leakage because we go after preventative maintenance and prognostic tools. When you look at all those tool sets, you say, why aren't these everywhere? And I think the main answer is they cost a lot and it's kind of a pain to install. So really the fundamental for us here at Thalo Labs has been, how do we take these really cool technologies that exist at the upper echelons of different industries and different building levels, the Class A's of the world, and bring them down in scale and cost so that you can deploy them everywhere. And that's really what we've been focusing on for the last few years. In so doing, when, for example, we have a product I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, where we can actively predict and get ahead of leakage and undercharge problems on heat pumps and refrigerant-based cooling. And that looks an awful lot like some of the work that we had done looking at coolant loops in defense. So heck of a lot cheaper now and a lot easier to deploy, but it's very, very similar in terms of technology. So that's what we do here at Thalo, is we try to democratize in many ways all this really cool technology that exists at the upper echelons and make it deployable. And the way that we have found this to work the best is, rather than trying to sell directly to buildings, we actually are deeply invested in supporting HVAC mechanical groups directly. And we think that that's actually the way to go faster and better in this world, is to make really good tools for the people who are actively actually doing all the work, so that their lives get easier, and therefore we get to aggressively improve how HVAC runs.
Very good. Tell me about what you think the ideal customer and the ideal facility or equipment would be. Both of those points, I think, because that'll help our listeners narrow into this.
In general, we find that our ideal customers are HVAC mechanical groups that do a lot of installation of refrigerant-based equipment, whether those are heat pumps like VRFs or split units, all the way through large chiller plants. And in some cases, we help out on combustion assets as well. And those groups that are worrying about that usually are in the top tier. They usually are the ones who have a lot of concern around maintenance contracts, particularly on the commercial side, where we primarily do our work. We are partnered with some who do significant amounts of residential work, but usually on the installation side. That ideal phenotype is, there's a lot of people who are actually doing that. And most of them are finding that they're quite busy. They won't be able necessarily to keep up with all the service calls, which frankly are kind of antiquated. Like our current leak detection system, most of the time is the customer saying, it's hot in here, come out and fix this thing. That's hard to get ahead of without technology. We also find that it's people who really, really care about the training and the development of new talent who are coming into the industry. Because if you can add a technical layer, then you can ensure and I think ramp those new technicians up through the process faster and with more assurance and data. Those are the types of people who we tend to focus on, as HVAC mechanical groups who really care about this. From a building standpoint, yeah, we do tend to focus on commercial just because there's such a natural pull to these large refrigerant-based systems where keeping it up is really mission critical. You might not think about that HVAC unit that's keeping the elevator room, mechanical room cool, but that's pretty critical pieces of equipment. And maybe you'd never put $1 million BMS system in there to fix it, but you probably would if you could. Those are the places we like to focus on.
So you mentioned BMS system, so building management system. So that would be more of a comprehensive energy management system, but this allows, and you said cost, so a different entry point in terms of that. But how about the quality or the way information is delivered compared to BMS?
We are sometimes asked, is this like a BMS? And the answer is not really. We actually think of our tools much more like equipment management, as an equipment management system, where you're looking at the fundamentals of actually how heat pumps and ACs and how are they actually running in real time. A great building management system is fantastic and has been shown repeatedly to be a huge cost saver if you can operate your building more efficiently. But they are really challenging to install, and that's one of the reasons that pervasiveness of BMS systems is actually pretty low. We're based here in New York, and you look outside and you get a lot of big buildings, and you say, like, oh, every building has a BMS, and that's not accurate. Most, in fact, the vast majority of buildings don't. Even in New York City, in our office here in Midtown, I'm the building management system at night, and when everyone leaves, I go and click off the breakers, as we do. So we think that the idea of trying to install building management systems on every piece of equipment is a very, very difficult barrier, and that's one of the reasons it's hard to accept. I think the number I last saw was about 13% of commercial buildings under a certain size have building management systems. Very low. So how do we get those other 85% of the buildings online and in a way that can be preventatively realized? We think that the answer is, well, you just add, like, instead of trying to give landlines, put landlines in places, just give every heat pump a cell phone and have a call home. And that was our take, is because the technology has developed so much just in the last few years, the sensing has gotten really, really good and also quite inexpensive. The teleconnection, so if you need to do cellular backhaul, it's actually so much better than it's ever been, and it's quite cost effective. And on top of it, you can start to do some stuff in the cloud in a very, very cost competitive way, where you can basically do what building management systems used to need a bunch of sensors to do and a bunch of compute and a bunch of category 6 wire spread out effectively wirelessly and installed in just a few minutes for a lot less capital. That's kind of what we think is like this next evolution in many ways will be, how do I leapfrog the landlines? And instead just, yeah, I like that phrasing of giving every heat pump a cell phone to call home. Boy, we should get there as soon as possible.
You mentioned installation. I wanted to go through the topics of installation, data collection, data delivery, and then dashboard. So those four major blocks. Can you talk us through those?
Yes, the 4Ds, I guess, is the pinnacle of this. So obviously, there have been many attempts to figure out how to get this data throughout the years. We don't pretend to be the first ones to attempt this at all. We do think that there has been a sea change in terms of the technical capabilities per unit cost that has really been enabled actually in just the last few years. So while my original work was really in these aero defense-y kind of spaces where cost is actually not that much of a driver for most of this. Most recently, I actually was working at multiple self-driving car companies, so both a Waymo and a GM Cruise, where I was responsible for developing the hardware that would make the cars robots, whether that was the cameras, the radars, the LiDAR systems, the telecommunications, the backhaul, the compute, the silicon programs. And the advances that came out of autonomy has really given birth to what I consider this new era of putting robots everywhere, where you can actually put like little smart robots on every one of your heat pumps. And it's a pretty good technician's helper because it's just staring at it all the time, 24 hours a day. And if you can do that for a low enough cost, then it actually just saves everybody a bunch of pain, headaches, and money later on. So in terms of the install side of things, we've taken an approach is like, how easy can we make the install for the HVAC groups? This can't be a pain. And indeed, I've always been surprised by how much assembly required for tools. If you go to HR, you see, well, you need this from here and this from here and this from here. It's like, boy, what a pain in the butt. And those same people who have that pain in the butt, they probably have a pretty nice phone and they've had a very good user experience before. So I don't know why we couldn't deliver them a good user experience with new tools as well. So the delivery, in terms of the actual installation, we try to do it once the boxes are open. Usually you can get it in less than a half an hour. Usually, if you're good at it, less than 10 plus minutes. So this can be done over the course of an easy install or at time of install of heat pumps, which is where we're increasingly getting installed when usually the money is flowing and there's a lot of opportunity to sell a multi-year service contract with preventative maintenance if you install it. The data pipelines, I think this is one of every small company has to solve at least one or two problems that they didn't necessarily want to or think they needed to. But getting data out of buildings is impressively challenging. Reliance on the customer's Wi-Fi connection, I think, is like one of the biggest Achilles heels in many otherwise excellent products. Because once you rely on somebody not changing their Wi-Fi router or their password and not thinking is like, oh, is my heat pump still connected? Once you break that, it makes it a lot easier. And some of the technical advances in the last few years have made that cost effective. So we default to not relying on at all any customer internet. In fact, oftentimes for some customers, we're providing internet for them to connect to their thermostats or some other components. We have a number of customers who rely on us to do the backhaul so that they can have nearly 100% uptime. And when it gets into the cloud, this is a great question and one I'm very interested, especially for your podcast audience, is I think literally everybody's making a dashboard. We have one too. But what we have found is that is useful for a subset of our customers, but oftentimes we really want to meet our customers where they live, which frequently is getting a text if something is really bad, or getting an email with a list of at the beginning or end of the week, hey, here's where all the equipment that I'm responsible for is. And like these things I should probably check out pretty soon, and maybe these in a couple of weeks. We've tried to be much more holistic in how we communicate with our customers. And we ask them at the beginning is like, what do you want? Of course, you can see the raw data, but if you don't want to nerd out on refrigerant loop temperatures, how would you like to get this information that would help you, your business? We do see an increasing pull towards integration with APIs. I think that in general, the trades are starting to get way more emphasis on software and software products to help do the jobs and everything from scheduling to billing and including our preventative maintenance. So I do think that will be a continued trend where there'll be like hey, can you just make this plug into the thing I'm already using for scheduling? We're looking at a lot of those as well.
Going back to the device itself, easy installation. If you were installing one, what would you be doing?
Yeah, I just did, by the way. Yeah. So I'm doing it pretty frequently.
Okay. All right. So it should be fresh in your mind.
Yeah. The idea we can talk through, this is the thing that we're selling the vast majority of right now. So this is a unit that would go on, for example, a VRF or a split unit.
And for people that are just listening and not seeing the video version of this, it looks like a compact router, if we could say that.
Yeah, you could say that. It's a relatively small box. I usually say a couple of decks of cards. It's about the right size. And the idea is that this will fit and snaps in with magnets, fit inside the enclosure of your heat pump. And then what we do is we have a couple connectors here on the front and the side. You plug it in to power. And we both draw power into the device, but we measure it in real time with utility grade power meters. So you'll know how much power is going through these units. We find this to be very, very useful in diagnosing potential issues, ranging everywhere from what is the duty cycle to holy moly, why is my power company feeding me 520 volts? And that's why things are, or phases going out of sync. We see power quality problems very, very consistently. And that's how we power the device. So to be clear, we don't use batteries in any particular way on this. We found that to be another really big pain is if you have to go around and replace all the batteries, you just added to the headaches, not remove them. And then these are our sensors. So these sensors these are primarily temperature sensors. We can do some other cool things as well. We have some like off menu beef options for things ranging. Usually it's like, can you put a sensor in my condensate pan? And then send me a text if it's wet. But the vast majority of work that we do is we put temperature sensors on the refrigerant loop. So what you should be hearing, hopefully, is that this is designed to be highly non-invasive. We do not monkey with the refrigerant loop directly. So we do not add pressure transducers or anything like that. We found those to usually leak, and that causes more problems than it solves. So this is intended to be highly non-invasive.
So there are 6 jacks for sensors, again, for people who are...
On this one, there's 6 plus, there's a little bit, you can daisy chain them for multiple compressors, for example. And then we have power on the backside, where you measure both the voltage and the current. And then it connects over usually we'll use cell connectivity, which we found to be the most useful in most metros.
So it's got an antenna or connection for an antenna, cable, antenna light, yeah.
And you can get it in pretty quick. That's not actually that much. Once you're good at it, you clamp into power, put on the clamps, put on a couple of temperature sensors, give it a quick kiss inside the unit. And then when the unit powers back on, it starts sending data over the cloud and you're almost instantly connected to it.
And you'd mentioned, how about power ranges, like for types of equipment?
We're based here in New York, so most of the stuff we see is 240 or under, usually. The current version for this, we of course are on a product development cycle. Our current version works up till 240, and we have a next version that will be up to 460, 480 systems.
Okay.
And we'll do 3-phase, obviously. We designed it in mind for that.
What's the user experience like? What are users telling you after these are installed?
There's, of course, multiple layers to the user. So oftentimes when we're selling to partnering with an HVAC mechanical group, we're working both with usually the boss, who actually wants a different user interface than the lead tech or the second tech. And that first user wants to know, all right, tell me how everything is doing and how are all my systems that I'm responsible for managing. It could be thousands of systems. If they manage large commercial products, it could be like a roof may have 25 VRFs or 10 VRFs and they have 100 to 200 roofs. That's a lot of work. So give me that full view. I want full visibility and dots on the map of where things are and what's red and what's green. When you get into the detail level, so the view and the experience that a technician would experience is much more, we hope to be complementary to their skill set, where we can say things like, hey, this one appears to be undercharged. This is why we think it's undercharged. And this is what we think we can help with. You should probably try these things. And the idea being that if we can cut some of the diagnosis time out ahead of time, it makes it for a much more pleasant and easy process to go there, because you can go ahead of time saying, all right, well, I'm probably going to need this refrigerant because we have the manual. And I'm probably going to need this much of it. And I'm going to go and try and diagnose maybe these 1 or 2 things. And on top of that, hey, here's the section of the manual that you're going to have to read to do those things so that you're not hunting around for something painful. So it's really, the experience is how much can we help our customers, the technicians and the people who are managing them, be able to get ahead of these problems.
When we met in person, either you or Celeste showed me the app. And how is the location tagged? Is that something someone must enter, or how does that work?
The nice thing is if you give every heat pump a cell phone, the cell phones usually know where they are. We've spent a little bit of time thinking about the best way to do this. We have some customers that there's a security concerns, so we're able to turn that feature off for certain. But the vast majority of people are like, yeah, please tell me which one it is. especially as you get to these multiple units. We have one building here in New York that has 2,000 separate PTACs, and they're running around changing the wrong one sometimes. So we've thought a lot about how do you set up which one is which. And the way we've found that works pretty well is you scan the QR code right at the time of install of the system. And that gives you a small helper where it's like, all right, are you here? Which unit is it on? And you can place it on your map of either the roof or the building. And then we've done some other silly things to try and make it easy. Like there's a buzzer inside. So like if you can't find which one's which, you can buzz it. Oh, it's that one. It's like, so just try to add little tools to make it easier.
That's not silly. That's clever.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. If you're staring down, you're like, which one of these identical systems is the problem? And maybe they're not labeled well, or maybe somebody went and changed which panel goes on which we've definitely seen multiple times. So it might be labeled incorrectly. Unit 5's panels on Unit 1. Which one is it really? Oh, it's this one.
You also mentioned you can refer to the manual. Is that correct?
I don't want to overuse the AI moniker, but we have found it very, very useful. We can spend a lot of time digging into like how everyone is alternately excited and scared of AI. We think it's a very powerful tool. So a lot of what we have built for actually diagnosing these problems is built on machine learning, but it's physics-based machine learning where we've actually taken real data on real heat pumps where we've drained the refrigerant and simulated a leak and then overcharged it and clogged the filter. We've done like real work to be able to build that model rather than just throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall. We've also found that one of the best places we are using generative AI is in how do I just make this a better place? So it's like with this knowledge and having read through the manuals and all the other stuff, how can I present that information to the technician as easily as possible? And if you've ever had to file through a 300-page manual for a heat pump to try and figure out what the heck to do next, like we find it to be a nice little useful tool. So that's one of the things we spend time on.
How about acquisition for the contractor? Okay, say someone listens to this and is interested. Where do they go to learn more? Where can they buy it? And can you give some idea of the cost?
So right now, this is early days. We have a wonderful problem, which is that we are quite backlogged on being able to ship these to new customers. We are actively looking for additional customers who will join our waitlist and our beta program. So these are the people who are willing to help us actually co-develop this product. We don't think of our customers just as like, hey, somebody bought something. These are partnerships that we want to continue to develop. And since we are developing tools for those partners, we want to talk to you and understand it's like, hey, if you had this thing instead of this, would this help? What is your biggest headache here? So if people are interested in joining that partner program and getting on the wait list, which has quite a bit of information, and we'll be reaching out and talking to you through where our pipeline is and how we're developing both the hardware and software sides of the product, we'd love to hear from you. The best way to do that is they can contact us at our website, thalolabs.com, THALO labs.com. And you can also email us at hello@thalolabs.com. I'd be happy to pick up. And of course, if anyone wants to bother me on LinkedIn, I'm delightfully available. In general, we're in the process of working through this really excellent backlog with our first set of customers. And we've been getting quite a bit of feedback to the point where we can't make them fast enough, which is, I think, a good problem to have.
Would you be looking for beta customers in the New York metropolitan area?
Ideally, if someone is local to our area, we would love to partner. There's a lot of stuff happening here in New York, and there's a lot of buildings, it turns out. So it's a good place to be doing pilots. And it's a great place for heat pumps because there's a lot of heat pumps coming in around here, especially on local law 97 projects where we're retrofitting buildings from combustion devices to all electric. Having said that, we're in 10 states and counting, so we do not limit ourselves to any one particular area. It turns out everybody has different problems. So we're happy to talk to anybody in North America right now.
Quick anecdote from my side. Really good friend of mine, colleague Jim Bergman, Measure Quick guy. He and I work for Testo, and they took us on a little tour of the city. We went to the top of the rock. And as we were going up the elevator and we got to the top, we looked out across the expanse of rooftop units and went, my God, there's a lot of work to be done. This conversation is like bringing me right back to that from 15 years ago or more.
It's funny. I'm from New York originally. I'm from the Bronx. And I was out in San Francisco for an extended period of time working at different startups and Google and Waymo and Cruise. I moved back here to New York to start this company. And you might say, why would you build a tech company in New York? And anybody who asks me that, they say, you should really come here and find out. At early days, I had one investor, in fact, say, well, I'm really concerned you're going to get stuck in the New York market. And I said, I don't think so, but if that happens, we'll be okay.
Right. There's a lot of work to be done.
What's nice is when you're developing new technology is the most important thing. The built environment is a difficult environment to make a new company and to sell into because the sales cycles are long. Everyone's very busy. But if you can set yourself up so that you are in the right spot so that there's so many more options to be able to test it versus if you're, for example, in many places in California, it's kind of nice out in California. So like you don't quite have the level of holy moly emergency, like you got to come here and fix this. So it makes it, I think, a lot easier to be in touch with your customer phenotypes and your base. And therefore you can do it faster. And then once you get a really good idea of what that looks like, that's when you can start to expand to other markets and other areas.
Can you tell us a little bit about your company? You're set up in metropolitan New York, and just tell us a little bit more about your company and sort of your role there.
Yeah, mostly I do emails and tweets, podcasts whenever I can. Well, I'm the CEO and founder, so I've been running this for just a few years now. We're pretty new to market. I, of course, have a little bit of a technical background, so I'm a physicist by training. So I'm still relatively dangerous on the product development side of how we design both the hardware, but also the software components. I feel that many companies ignore or maybe emphasize one versus the other. Really, it's a means to the end of delivering a whole product, which is the experience to our HVAC customers. It's been a very exciting time. We found some tailwinds around sustainability for a little while. We felt that pull back in recent times. And the one thing that we think about a lot is as long as we're building a good product that really satisfies a need. And I don't see HVAC in general going away, regardless of political headwinds, regardless of what's happening from a recession standpoint. We're going to need to keep heating and cooling buildings. And we feel that we can answer that mail with good products, regardless of what's happening externally. And that's really where we try to focus is like the best type of product is one that doesn't really care that much about all the other things. It's really about, am I providing a specific value for our customers?
Got it. And you shared a little thought with me before we started about an analogy between running a company and doing something else.
Yeah. I actually was asked this somewhat recently is like, what was the thing that you were not expecting as much? Because everyone thinks that you're running a company. It's really around the business and the strategy. And then there's the technology side and there's HR. And the thing that I wasn't expecting to do quite as much is what feels like improvisational comedy. Because you're oftentimes getting dumped into a situation where like, what are we doing here? What do we want to have happen out of this interaction? Or tell me more about that. Oh, did you care about this thing? Okay, that's totally different. Let's go over there. So I feel like it's been an exciting crash course in how to do improv in some ways.
Keeps you light on your feet for sure.
Yeah.
What closing thoughts can you leave us with for our listeners?
I do like to bring up, I think a lot of the listeners already have an intuitive sense that when things are installed in the field, there are issues. I've enjoyed this a lot. One of the great joys I have as we have been deploying more and more of our systems is that we're able to get some really interesting statistics out of this. For example, we find that almost 40% of heat pumps, in particular, this is a combo of VRFs and splits, these systems are undercharged and or leaking. And we're able to tell if it's really bad very quickly. And of course, we're able to tell if it's a little bit over time. But the fact that that number is so high, I think really speaks to some of the issues and pain that most of the people who are in this field are really seeing day to day. The reason that the callbacks are 10, 20 plus percent is because it was leaking from the start. We find that that, of course, leads very quickly also into compressor problems. If you leave it undercharged, you eventually beat the crap out of that compressor. It's also the hardest working compressor in show business that whole time it's leaking. It's still making hot or cold, but boy, are you burning a lot of energy to do it. So the customer might be complaining a lot. We just did an install last week in upstate New York. This customer was a low middle income community group, and they put in all new heat pumps last year. It was really great. They wanted to be electrified, and they're paying about 3x their energy bill that they expected. And they've had a couple of compressors fail already. And it's like, that's pretty bad if it's this recent. And of course, there's the whole host of other problems that you find with the clog filters and the electronics issues. So one of the things that I do want to parlay is, one of the things I do want to talk about is there are tools now that can help this, that can make that install process go better and go with more assurance. that just like, yeah, I know this thing has been commissioned correctly and I can walk away feeling really good about that, which is not only good for the customer interaction, but it's also really, really good for the HVAC business because they just are going to make better margin if they don't have to keep going back and fixing stuff. And we are really excited to be at the vanguard of some of those tools.
Yeah, it's like you give heat pumps a voice.
It does. And it's one of those that we think delightfully complementary with all the other tools that have existed. This doesn't replace your gauges. This just helps extend those once those gauges leave the heat pump. It doesn't replace a building management system. It works in conjunction, if they have one, with something that can be like, hey, we are actually really looking at the data on this device. And this can turn an emergency call into a very, very controlled, scheduled maintenance thing weeks in advance, way before an error code is ever thrown on the device, way before the customer ever calls you saying, hey, there's something wrong with this guy. So if we can work with all those other tools and build this little niche out so that an HVAC group can see the future a little bit, we feel like that's exactly where we want to be in terms of developing it. And in so doing, I think everybody wins. The customer has a better experience. They spend less energy. We, as one of our features, when we white label our dashboard and our reports, we can tell the HVAC group's customer how much energy they just saved. You can put a dollar value on it. And that's like great for retention. Why would you ever switch if you can tell that? So these numbers, I think, are just starting to come to fruit where I think there have been a lot of estimates. ASHRAE has estimates. A lot of groups have estimates of problems in HVAC systems. But now with this raw data, I think this is probably going to be the dawn of data-driven HVAC maintenance. And it's super exciting to be at that early stage.
Sounds very promising, and really want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing this with us. And hopefully we get some people to connect with you afterwards. But one final burning question. Why the name Thalo Labs?
Oh, Thalo Labs. I'm happy to give the reason. So, this is dumb. Come with me on this journey.
Okay.
Throughout antiquity, one of the things that humans have struggled to do is create colors for pigments, like for paints and other things. That's why aquamarine blue, crimson red have been some of the most expensive commodities on the planet at different times, more than spices, more than other things. And we actually have only recently, in the last about 100 years, filled out the full human experience of color with a number of synthetic dyes. And some of the most last ones that were done were to capture the color of the deep blue sky. And those are called phthalo blue and phthalo green. It's actually PTHALO, phthalo. And I've always liked that idea of, well, if you could add a little bit of technology, you can paint the color blue just a little bit deeper to match our human experience. It's also one of Bob Ross's favorite colors. If you ever watch the Bob Ross, he's like, well, I had a little phthalo blue in here. And I think during the pandemic, I was sitting calming myself with some Bob Ross. I was like, phthalo sounds great. So we called it Thalo Labs and called it a day.
Blue sky. Yeah. Opportunity. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Brendan. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And I hope some of our guests take a look at the links in the show notes and get in touch with either you through LinkedIn or through your company with the email address and website I'll put in there.
Bill, thank you so much for having me on here. And thank you for all the service that you do for the community. I think that's unheralded and really, really so important for the overall community build. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. It's fun, especially talking to people like you. Take care.
Likewise. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Building HVAC Science podcast. If you have any questions or want to suggest a topic, you can reach out to us at marketing@truetechtools.com. That's TRUTECHTOOLS.com. Some of these topics we discuss require technical training for proper interpretation or safe execution. So if you're a trained pro, you can proceed immediately. If you're not, please consult with and hire a trained pro. The Building HVAC Science podcast is a production of True Tech Tools Limited. Full disclosure, I'm the owner of True Tech. And the opinions expressed are those of my guests, my co-host, when he's here, or myself, depending on who is speaking, of course. If you're in the market for any tools or test instruments mentioned in the podcast, actually except Thalo Labs right now, we're not selling it, but maybe we will in the future. Look at what TrueTechTools.com has to offer. That's TRUTECHTOOLS.com. And you can use the offer code HVACBS for a nice discount. I want to thank you for listening to and following us on Building HVAC Science. Until next time, take care.